Many thanks to remaining tuned to the Arise special coverage of the 2024 Edo State governorship election. I'm Ruth Osime. As we move on, let's now switch to our next set of guests. With us here in Lagos is Malachy Ugwummadu, a lawyer and public affairs analyst. And from Arise Abuja studio, we're being joined by human rights activist and member, Nigerian Election Situation Room, Ene Obi. Good morning to both of you.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Okay. This is a very interesting period, and everybody is sitting here with bated breath to see who will finally emerge as the next governor of Edo State. But I want to ask you, do you believe the current economic hardship and stomach infrastructure will continue to play a major role in these elections as always? What do you think will be different this time around?
Well, to a very large extent, one can hazard a guess in that regard. The natural instinct is to say that since hunger has largely been weaponized in our environment, it is possible that the proverbial stomach infrastructure will play a heavy role. But here is the point. I think over time, and with the incremental improvement in our electoral processes, the gray areas, the red flags, the spots, difficult areas of our election processes have been identified, and that is, which includes inducement of electorate. And to that extent, even by yesterday, I listened to the DIG in particular, who said they are watching and looking out for inducement and how people or electorates will be influenced in one way or the other. So whereas that may be part of the context, in quote, it may also not entirely depend on that for the outcome. Look at the clips you just showed prior before we came on board. You could see that even under the rains, the Edo people are out there. You might say not in the same quantity of numbers that was expected, but that kind of voluntary desire to be part of the process speaks to a people who are resolved to actually effect a change, not from the standpoint of what they are given, but driven by the force of their conviction that there is indeed a need for change. So in direct response to your question, I would say yes, it has always been a factor. The stomach infrastructure, as we have been made to realize, has always been there, particularly given the economic circumstances we find ourselves. But in it, you also find the desire of the people to be part of the change that they desire or want to have.
Okay, can we have Ene in Abuja, please? Now, Ene, I want to ask you, considering federal might and voter suppression, how have the security agencies been able to restore confidence in the electoral process and not allow political parties and politicians play any role in their activities?
Thank you very much, Ruth, and well done for the great job you're doing out there.
Thank you very much.
I think if you want to look at what the political might have been able to do, we should now focus on professionalism. The Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room issued a press release yesterday, from the Situation Room in Edo, to say that the police, the security agencies should be professional. That's what we're looking at from them. Though there were things before, prior to the election, we saw arrests going on. We don't have quite the statistics, but we want to watch them and we encourage them to be professional. One of the things we are getting from the field, as at 10 o'clock this morning, some of our colleagues had gone to about 100 polling units, and out of that 100, we had about only two was there, only two polling units had, voting process ongoing. The others have not received any materials. The INEC officials were not on ground. Maybe that has changed now, but, so what we saw is like, they now went to the local government. The local government areas, they had the buses. Buses were there, and but there were no police people to go with the materials. There were police people from the places that they had inspected. The policemen were on ground in all of the polling stations. But what about those to escort, the materials from the local government to this? And the drivers said they were not moving unless they had the police. So this is calling on the IGP and calling on the police commissioner in Edo State to quickly rescue that, talk to the men in all the local governments and also make sure, because we heard that about 27,000 or how many thousand police people were deployed to Edo State. So we want to see that professionalism. We don't believe in the hearsay now. Let's watch on the ground. And I think at this point, every Nigerian should account for themselves, because you are writing your history. Do not be pursued by the political class. Because many Nigerians have been sentenced to death by hunger, by the political class. Hunger has no language, it has no tribe, it has no ethnicity, it has no respect for age. And so all of the things we're talking about is the suffering is because of misgovernance, and so much has been lack of indecision or bad decisions by our political class. And that's why we had the End Bad Governance protest. But we are looking at Edo State today. Let it be an example. I hope INEC is also listening, that it can turn the table. It's a good thing to see, some of the party leaders haven't, casted their votes. Let's hope that, because usually between 8 and 10, there is a bit of a slow march. But we are aware too that this particular scenario played in Kogi State, where late arrivals or no arrival of materials in certain places. So I think the report that is coming from the field, we should be able to listen to them and adjust.
Okay, let's get back to you, Macaulay. What deliberate steps do you think should be taken to ensure that the political class, like Ene just mentioned, do not play any active role in assisting INEC to deploy election materials as observed in previous elections?
Well, that is supposed to be a rhetorical question, in my view. The reason being that if the contest is set for the political class itself, then they cannot be part of those deploying the logistics to deal with the election itself. They are players. So they can only be players and not even regulators at the same time. But I think, responding deeply to that question, I think that the election itself is a contest. So if you have the players on the one hand, you have the electorate on the other hand, and you have yet the election monitoring body, superintending the whole activities. What usually will give a credible outcome, lending legitimacy to the process, is the level of participation of the electorate themselves. And it is their participation in the process that determines whether it was indeed a fair, free, and credible election. Therefore, it is always on the part of the citizens of the country, regardless of the powers and influence that the electoral class wields, to be able to own the process and discharge their civic responsibilities in a way that reflects the wish of the people. So at the end of the day, which is precisely why civic education has always been advocated to be part of the intensive training that must be given to the electorate leading up to the election. It is possible to just have election and people come cast their vote. That speaks to the validity of the process. The legitimacy of what happens is the degree of participation of those whose wishes ought to be captured in the ultimate outcome of the... Look at the early morning showers. The fact that people came out, and in many wards and polling stations, you have Nigerians who were prepared and willing to cast their vote, demonstrates the desire of the people to be part of the process. Now, the late arrival, as we hear now, not in all polling stations, but in quite a number of stations, which would not have happened if we were very serious with dealing with the logistic crisis that has been recurring in each election cycle. Mind you, this is an off-season election where a particular state is targeted, heavy deployment of security, enough logistic arrangement, and one would have thought that by 10:15, 10:30 thereabout, you wouldn't have heard of any story regarding the absence or late arrival of whoever is talking about there were vehicles, but there were no policemen to accompany them, or that there were no policemen, but there were vehicles. All of this ought to have been anticipated. All of this ought to have been taken care of before this D-Day as we speak. In my view, it might be too early to conclude that this is how the election has gone or not. But they say the morning shows the day. If people are on ground, even some of your reporters, listening to Vietimi George in particular, repeatedly, up till around 10 a.m., in the particular polling booth where he is, I'm from Delta State, so I can speak of those places that are close to the Agbo, Aziz, and co. And that there are no voting materials, sensitive or not. The deployment of the electoral officers have been shoddy. Then there's room for concern. I am hopeful that as the day go by, and before midday and maybe 1, 2, we'll have a clearer picture of what ought to be an ideal election, because this is going to be a pointer moving forward.
Okay, thank you so much. Former Governor of Edo State and APC Senator Adams Oshiomhole, a moment ago, voted as his polling unit in Ward 10, Etsako West local government area. Okay, let's go back to Ene. Ene, are you in the house? Yes, there you are. So do you think, looking at Adams Oshiomhole there now, voting for his obvious candidate, which is Ugwummadu, do you think the power of incumbency, Godwin Obaseki's performance, and his relationship with the Oba's palace will influence the outcome of the results?
Well, I'm not a citizen in Edo State. I think power belongs to the people. Whatever their thoughts have been in the last 4 years will help them to decide whatever the outcome of the election will be. You know, it is for them to have seen the 8 years of Obaseki and look at whatever it continues, because even politically, Nigerian political parties, their ideological bases are almost the same, or their manifestos are almost the same, but their ideology is very, very temporal, because many of them can even switch. After they win election, they switch to another party, which means you were not rooted in your party per se. So we cannot tell exactly whether, because of his behavior, one way or the other, I cannot comment on that, because there is a crisis within a state, and the citizens have the right to make up their minds whichever way they want to go. There can also be a different personality in the person that is coming, because usually some people feel that the person that is coming is the same as the one that has left. It may not be the same. We have seen changes in other places, so that may not be the determinant of the election. But again, I think we need to pull out whatever we are thinking into the voting. And I want to say that when you made a comment on how citizens, in terms of suppression and all, we need to hold citizens accountable. All citizens of Nigeria. Who is a citizen in Nigeria? We need to look at ourselves. You as media, men and women, you are really doing the great job. And the citizens, when you occupy, if you are in the security, you are also a citizen. How are you accountable to yourself and holding yourself accountable for your country? whether you are a polling officer, wherever you are you pulling your weight? Are you getting ready to be the Nigerian and see the Nigeria that you want? What role do you play? And so all of that comes together when we are looking at what will happen.
Okay. Let's get back to my call in the house. Malachy, sorry. You know, there have been some fake news and press releases flying around where people have desperately resorted to forgery, disinformation, and blackmail. There was a fake letter allegedly written by the Labour Party candidate, Ugwummadu, saying he was stepping down for PDP candidate Ugwummadu. And there was also a fake magistrate court ruling purportedly disqualifying Senator Monday Okpebholo as the APC gubernatorial candidate in the election. Now, these letters have been proven to be fake, or these documents have been proven to be fake, but they've caused so much confusion in their midst. So what can be done to bring the perpetrators of these actions swiftly to justice so as not to encourage such incidents in time to come?
Well, that is strictly a security problem, one that touches on the responsibilities of the law enforcement agencies to handle in election processes such as this. Where you veer off from your civic responsibility and begin to commit malfeasance touching on criminal infractions clearly prohibited by law, then you can be taken on. The challenge is, have we been well resourced? Have we been well trained and equipped, particularly with civic responsibilities such as election, to be able to identify the culprits and deal with them? There were so many hues and cries, so many statements of assurances issued by law enforcement agencies, cut across all of them, from police to, including EFCC, civil defense, custom, all of them assembled together to be able to deal with this situation. So I think that for the purpose of deterrence, which is part of what your question points at, these people should be identified. I'm talking of those who perpetrated these fake impersonations and abuses should be identified. Now, if an Olumide Akpata, for instance, is going to defect and lend support, must he be PDP? Why not APC? These are questions that would have normally come in the mind of the public who are targeted to be deceived and confused. What about the one who has withdrawn his candidature and so on and so forth? I am making the point that the work is cut out for the law enforcement agencies. If you are going into any form of forgery, and come to think of it, what role has the magistrate court to do in election matters? None. Except, of course, maybe the trial, some trial of some misdemeanor during election processes. Otherwise, the whole thing starts in the Federal High Court, proceeds to the Court of Appeal and then to the Supreme Court. But if it is pre-election matters, it starts that way too. It gets to the election petition tribunals and so on and so forth. So I make the point that those who are perpetrating these infractions have not even been too ingenious. They are disingenuous in the way and manner they are carrying out. And then the public, at least in Edo State in particular, are quite sophisticated to be swayed by those kind of behavior that doesn't quite communicate what they intended to. The bigger point is that the law enforcement agencies have been paid, they have been resourced, they have been mobilized, and then, you know, the scope of their operations have been made clear to them. They should be able to identify there's enough in terms of the equipment they now have to track some of these malfeasance, to identify those who have done this and make scapegoats out of them. That way, others who intend to will learn that it is no longer business as usual. And then the public should be allowed to voluntarily, in a free and fair manner, make their choices and reflect their wishes.
Okay. Let's get back to Ene, please. Now, Ene, I want to ask you this as a woman. First ladies usually play a very prominent role when it comes to campaign and what have you with their spouses. In these cases, two of the contestants didn't have any first ladies that played any particular role per se. So do you think that might work to their disadvantage when it comes to collecting votes?
Well, it depends on individuals. Individuals, the men that are contesting, if they wanted their wives to play a role, they will be there because we still have the women's wing or those representatives of the female who go out mobilizing, doing serious mobilization during elections. And so if they didn't want their females to be involved, and in many of the elections that we're seeing, we were not seeing not many women were coming out. But when it comes to mobilizing voters, they pull them out. And that's why the absence of women in terms of being voted for or counting them as a part of the representation, or when it comes to appointive positions, then we are lacking there. And it's such a big shame that in the whole of these states, many of the states, they can't find qualified women who can be deputy. You know, even when we have gone to Beijing, it's almost Beijing plus 30 now, where they talked about 35% affirmative action. You know, we still haven't learned in terms of, and so women, we have to strengthen the women agency going to the next elections to say, if we are not seeing the faces of women, or if you cannot even find a woman to be on the 50-50 parity, since we have the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 5 is talking of gender equality, and we are not moving anywhere near them. In the current houses of assembly, you know, the governors that have been running, we don't have women running for the governorship, or they are running and they are being, you know, outsmarted. In the local government chairman elections, we are not seeing women being fielded. You know, so there is a lot that we need to look at. It depends on how they respect women or the dignity of women, and I don't see how many times you have to tell people you need to acknowledge this gender in your own public life, because at the end of the day, no matter how tall you are standing, no matter how big you are as a president or as a governor, a mother gave birth to you. If she didn't play her own active role, you won't be alive today. And so how come a woman now who nurtured somebody from the beginning to the end is not given you know, respect and also the dignity that she deserves and the place? Because when you are in the school, all of you sit together in the class, despite the difficulties that women go through sometimes because of the time of the month. You know, they still are able to qualify. Some of them take first and the guys take second, but they are not recognized. So it depends on the recognition that these men have given to their spouses, and you can't force them to do the other needful, and what becomes of them at the end of the day.
Okay, it's good that you mentioned this, because I want to ask you.
But I want to say that the female, that's Mrs. Obaseki, did a lot of work. We worked with her in Edo State, you know, in her own terrain, looking at the dignity of women and also working with UN Women and making sure that the state was able to make a lot of report, you know, at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. You know, she did a lot. So the place of women or first ladies cannot just be discarded, but we also want direct women involvement in governance.
Like I said, it's good that you mentioned this, because there was an incident that happened during the political campaign. If you recall, Mrs. Obaseki had mentioned or had asked the Edo people whether they would want a governor that would enter the State House without a first lady. And Adeanso Shomole now retorted by saying that who are they to talk, considering that they're a childless couple. So that obviously left a bitter taste in many mouths. So at some point, don't you think moral compass should have a limit to how far they can go and what they can say? And in other climes, a statement like this might have affected the results of his own candidates. So where do you think the line should be drawn when it comes to political exchanges and candidates, you know, passing insults to each other? What did you think about that statement?
Okay, I think many people just lower their own, you know, self when you demean yourself when you make some comments, you know, really. Because what does, you know, we don't get too personal. If you are not married, you are a human being. All human beings are equal. Let's say that they are not married. That's why we are not hearing the voices of the first ladies. If they are not married, they have their right to occupy the office, because a first lady office is not even recognized in the Constitution. It's just like we are fond of doing things that are unconstitutional. Just like you have ministers of state, and you know there's no minister of state in the Constitution of Nigeria. Yet the president will appoint people, ministers of states and all of that. You know, and so when you get down to even belittle a woman, just like what they are talking about, you know, the vice president of United States, you go down little. Women raise so many children. Their life is about others. And so you don't have to, I remember a colleague of mine that I was working with, and said she will not have any child, but she went on to adopt. You see, there are so many children who are seeking for care. And so for her, she has decided to dedicate her life to 2 children. And she went on, an American woman who was working in Nigeria then, she went and adopted these children and took them home to their family. And it's been wonderful. So women don't just think about themselves. It's not about having your biological children. I have so many children that are not my biological children. And I love them just like I love my biological. And so you find out that a woman who is also not married will pay the school fees of the brother's children, the sister's children, the uncle's children, and so on and so forth. They should not get to that level of, degrading level or start challenging people on that. Let's look at the quality of the self. You are a person first and foremost. And so you go there, and go and do the job. Be a servant to the people, not some people who will be served. Transparency, accountability, it should be about, the election. Who is transparent enough? Who will go, to the house and be able to? Nature will take care of themselves. If they don't have wives, they'll be able to, they should be able to have people that will serve in the house. And then, since there wasn't any First Lady's office anyway, they use it actually. I think it's because of the gender gap. And if you had a president who is a governor who is a male, and you have a deputy who is a female, the woman will step up to do things that concerns women. Because we have so many houses of assembly without a single woman. And you have women committees, and you are discussing the issues of women. You cannot be, you don't know where, who, how, if you don't wear the shoes, you don't know where it pinches. It pinches. So inclusion should be a very major target.
Okay, that's a good one. Now, let's get back to you, Malachy. There's also the climate of fear and voter apathy. And though INEC has reassured stakeholders that they are ready for the election, how can the neutrality of INEC and CSOs be guaranteed this time around?
Well, you will agree with me that there has been a steady decline in the enthusiasm of the Nigerian electorate. This is not far-fetched. It has everything to do with the repeated failure of leadership and accountability and transparency in the whole process, such that people just go home thinking that their votes and participation don't matter. You don't blame them for that. You heap the blame on the doorstep of the law, of the system, of the election management body, as well as other stakeholders in the process. If there is sufficient guarantee that the outcome of votes, will be the main and sole determinant of what becomes of the exercise, believe you me, so many electorates will have a renewed interest in the process. Even as a lawyer, the volume of cases we see that attend to every election cycle, in many respects, diminishes the confidence of even lawyers, because that is what we now term as over-judicialization of our election processes. The whole essence of election is to locate the wish and desire of the people. And the only way you do that is through the ballot box. If you're going to leave the outcome of an election in the hands of 3, at most 7 judicial officers who are appointed to interpret the law more or less, then you could see that alone can discourage the people. So I have managed to situate that in relation to the voters' apathy that we see. But over the years, if there is a deliberate, conscious effort to improve on all of these lapses that we have seen, chances are that the electorate will become more enthusiastic the voting numbers will increase, and ultimately, the legitimacy of what comes out will be assured, or better assured. Now, talking about the general security system, the number that the Nigerian police force reeled out, almost 35,000 police officers in one single state, complemented by other law enforcement agencies, up to DSS, EFCC, and what have you, Army, Navy, all of them. That would have been enough to guarantee the, to reassure the people and guarantee that there will be peace and security. But we have a history, and we are coming from somewhere. Even as recent as 2 last general elections in the past, we hear of some states where people are decapitated just for the purpose of election.
Wow.
We hear, particularly in Rivers State, Delta, where I come from, and a few flashpoints where people are killed simply because of election. In fact, I think that what the politicians also do in our climb, and unfortunately too, is to refrain from the campaign that will restore hope and confidence in the people and tell them about the expectations that they bear along the line of, programs and projects. You hear very volatile languages about how they are going to deploy violence and militia. You hear on tape these days how politicians will boast of what they are going to do along the line of marching force for force. In short, one of the godfathers in this particular election, was asked a question whether he used the word trying to describe this election as a do-or-die election. And I think it was on your statement. He repeated it, that he said so. And that is because the other people have not shown reasons why he shouldn't say so. And when he was nudged on to describe and explain what he means by do-or-die, he couldn't say any further than that. But
pretty straightforward, that kind of comment.
Well, and so the point I make is that whereas you have flooded the whole place with law enforcement agencies, that is exactly not what restores confidence. I used to remember when we were in the university and you have security men all over, and I was wondering, you cannot be talking of an academic environment and you have people wielding guns at every curve and corner. That is not academic. Academic, the whole notion of academic reflects free thought. And you cannot freely think when you have people wielding guns over your shoulder and so on and so forth. So we cannot over-police this system. Yes, it is true that we have a rough background. We're coming from a very dangerous experiences where you need to have these security officers. But the more we demilitarize the process and take steps that guarantee and shows that this is a civic responsibility, the more we'll be moving closer to people who would otherwise want to participate in the process and not be scared by the whole atmosphere of violence in the system. So it's good that we're having what we're having. My own take these days is that ours has been a process. We are at this stage now. Moving forward, if we keep at it, we'll get it better.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Malachy
Ugwummadu.
And thank you so much, NLB, for being with me this morning. I respect your views, and we hope we are going on the break right now, and we will welcome our next guest coming in. See you right back.
Thank you.